Have you ever dreamed of traveling the world, enjoying flights and hotels without breaking the bank? With credit cards, points, and benefits, it's 100% possible, and I've done it. But is it truly worth it? On one hand, you can stick with 2% cashback cards and never look back. On the other hand, you can unlock some incredible travel experiences for minimal cost. The reality though is it's much harder than just using a card, earning points, booking a trip, and packing your bag. So in this video, I'm revealing what they don't tell you about award travel, including the overlooked challenges and opportunities that you need to keep in mind, and the realities behind what it really takes to turn your credit card points and benefits into unforgettable experiences. Now, at a high level, what are the actual steps you need for those experiences? First, you gotta pick the right cards, whether it's the Chase Trifecta with cards that earn you a ton of points across common categories, supercharged with the Chase Sapphire Preferred, the Citi Trifecta, or even the American Express cards. You really can't go wrong with either of these because they all have a good mix of beginner-friendly and premium cards that work together to cover a lot of different bases. That said, next you need to know when to use which card. With the Chase Trifecta, if you're shopping on Amazon, you'll want to remember that, hey, this quarter has 5 times points when spending at Amazon. If you're booking travel outside of any specific portal, then the Sapphire Preferred with its 2 times points on all other travel. You're leaving points and value on the table if you don't know, at least for your most used categories, which are your go-to cards. For me, dining and travel will go on my Chase Sapphire Preferred, earning me 3 times and 2 times points. Direct airline bookings will go on my Amex Platinum card, giving me 5 times points. Special categories will go on the Freedom Flex, giving me 5 times points as well, and then everything else on my Capital One Venture X, giving me 2 times miles. Although I have 11 different cards open, not all of them are in my wallet at the same time, only a few are. Once you've earned those rewards, usually in the form of points, you'll need to know how to redeem them for value. You could go for cashback, typically at 1 cent per point when you're talking about Chase points, or 1.25 or 1.5 cents per point when going through the Chase travel portal, depending on the Sapphire card that you have. Or Amex points redeeming at 1.1 cents per point when going through the Charles Schwab version of the Platinum card. Personally, I don't go through any of those because pretty much 99% of all my points redeemed are actually through transfer partners, where each of the major card issuers typically have anywhere between 10 to 20 different partners you can convert those points to at favorable rates, giving you options to redeem for typically even more value. This is where those elevated experiences and award travel comes in. Now, although there's quite a few things to keep in mind here, you do get used to it after a while, since things don't change that quickly in this credit card space. There's only that many good credit cards out there, with maybe 1 or 2 new good ones every year. The challenging part is using your points and rewards, ensuring you get the most value or at least good value out of them. Take Chase points for example. They can be worth between 1 to 1.5 cents per point, depending if you're going for cashback or the Chase travel portal. But how do these values compare if you compare them with transfer partners? Let's break down a real-world example. Say you wanted to fly the amazing EVA Airlines from the West Coast over to Taipei. That'll cost you 75,000 points plus about $56 in fees. Do that round trip and it's 150,000 points at about $112. If we look at how much it would cost when paying in cash, that's about $5,661. Once you have the two numbers, you want to calculate to see how much value you're getting for each of your points. So you take the cash value, $5,661, subtract the fees of the award ticket, $112, divided by the points needed, 150,000 points, giving you 3.7 cents per point. Since Chase transfers the Aeroplan at a 1-to-1 rate, that's much higher than the 1 to 1.5 cents per point in value you get through Chase themselves. Occasionally, there are extra transfer bonuses as well, like Chase transferring to Aeroplan with a 20% bonus. That means you'll only need 125,000 points instead, and so recalculating the formula, you actually get 4.4 cents per point in value. In more extreme scenarios, you can actually purchase Aeroplan points at a steep discount instead, sometimes as low as 1.14 cents per point. That means the 150,000 points needed will only cost you $1,710 plus the award ticket fee of $112, resulting in just over $1,800 for that round trip ticket that would have costed over $5,600. So to summarize, it's crucial to compare the easier value through the issuer themselves with the potentially higher value you get going through transfer partners while also factoring in any bonuses and discounts. This approach also applies to hotel bookings too. For my trip last year to Tokyo, I actually compiled all the different hotels that fit my itinerary. I included the points needed, the price in cash, as well as the rate I was getting per each of my points compared to a benchmark value. I even added columns to show how much more value I was getting above that benchmark value. Ultimately, the AAC Hotel Tokyo Ginza was the best value, so that's exactly where I stayed for the trip. If you're interested, I'll link a template down below if you want to adapt it for your own travels. Everyone approaches things differently, and not everyone needs to be as analytical. But for me, it actually helps me calm down knowing that factually these numbers make sense and is giving me some good value. But the next thing people don't really talk about is that yes, with reasonable effort, you can get 3, 4, 5 cents per point in value on those long haul flights in business or first class. However, if you're the type to really fly within North America or purely travel in economy, then it's going to be much harder to hit those values. You're more likely to get 2 or maybe 3 cents per point in value on the high end, meaning the gap putting in the work going through these transfer partners is much narrower compared to direct with the issuer. That said, because the value isn't as insane, there's more opportunity to be had, with award space being so much easier to find. Take the previous example flying to Taipei. There's only 1 business class seat on this day, but there's 9 economy seats. However, that would still cost you 50,000 points each way for 100,000 points round trip, plus the same $112 in fees. And when paying in cash, it's a much lower $1,382. And so doing the same calculation as before, we're only getting 1.27 cents per point. At that rate, it's pretty much equivalent to going through the Chase travel portal, but with a lot more hassle. Or maybe you want to escape to Cancun in December, you might be paying over $500 round trip for that flight, but if you're going through Avios booking American Airlines, that would cost you 18,000 points plus about $171, where doing the same calculation, you're getting 1.83 cents per point, almost at that 2 cents per point mark. While not as high as those international long-haul redemptions, again, it's much easier to find these availabilities. So there's a trade-off to be made here that only you can answer. Do you travel more locally or internationally? Are you content flying economy with lower value per point, or are you interested in those elevated travel experiences to get higher value per point, if that even matters to you? Either way though, and no matter where you travel, another thing to keep in mind is that yes, you can spend next to nothing booking your flights and hotels using these points and rewards. However, during your trip, you'll probably have a ton of other spend as well, which is why it's important to know which cards you're bringing with you along your trip and how you're spending with them when you're at your destination. For me, that could mean bringing my Schwab debit card so I can take out money at ATMs with all the fees reimbursed, or making sure I bring no foreign transaction fee cards so I avoid being dinged 3% on my purchases. And of course, good cards for dining like my 3 times on the Chase Sapphire Preferred, Transit on my Amex Business Gold card, and my Venture X for all other shopping. That, or if you know you're going to be spending a lot, it might be worth considering another credit card where you can work towards a minimum spend for, like the Amex Gold. Maybe you could finally hit that $6,000 of spend across the first 6 months, netting you a welcome bonus of 75,000 points, just enough for another one of those business class flights over to Asia. A tip to keep track of all of this: use tools like Max Rewards or card pointers that will remind you when you're actually spending. That said though, in an economy where inflation is so high and money is tight, traveling can be tougher for a lot of people. And because a lot of those higher value reward options are centered around travel, that could be a reason where you want to opt to book cashback cards or regular flights instead. Because not only will food cost money, but what about the activities when you're at your destination? Transportation, getting around, spending money? There's a lot to consider. Alright, the next thing not mentioned enough, let me ask you this. What if I told you you can fly over to Asia in business class for just 75,000 points in the next few weeks? Could you make the time to do so? If you can, that's amazing, and you should totally go check it out right now, because there's a lot of availability and options to cities in Asia like Taipei, Tokyo, and Korea. But I would imagine that your average person would not be able to. Usually people have limited vacation every year, or maybe you have a family and it's hard to coordinate your travel schedules, let alone it being exponentially harder to find more than 1 or 2 seats per flight. The reason this flexibility is so important is because most of the space opens up almost a year in advance, so you need to be able to lock in your plans that far out, or near term like the next 2 to 3 weeks. You could raise your chances even more if you're flexible on where you want to fly to, because like I mentioned, there's a ton of options when looking at the next few weeks, but doing the exact same search just a couple months out, you have less than a handful of options. And so to help you have the highest chances possible, have a list of where you want to fly to and which dates you can fly. Then use search tools like Seastar Aero, link down below, not sponsored, it's just my go-to tool, and set alerts based on your criteria so you can be alerted on when they're available. And also be flexible enough having the points ready to use at a moment's notice, because technically the longer the points sit there, the higher the chance of it being devalued. British Airways Avios. And that if you went the cash back route instead, you could be putting that money to work for you instead of just sitting there in points. And speaking of changes like devaluations, changes in this space happen all the time. My channel is about cards, points, benefits, and travel, so it makes sense. But for your average person, it takes a lot of effort and time to keep up with everything, which is why I hope this channel and sharing my personal experiences helps all of you out. Like I mentioned earlier, knowing which cards are good is usually okay given new cards don't come out that often, but it's knowing how to redeem your rewards for good value that is hard, especially when things there change all the time. From what I've seen, these changes can happen in one of a few ways. Devaluations happen, making some redemptions just not worth it anymore. 2, options can be taken down without any notice. For example, a few months ago when I was booking my trip to Taiwan and Thailand for next year, almost all the dates in March had 4 to 5 seats available for booking through Air France and Virgin. In the last month or so, they've all been taken down, only to recently been re-added, but only 1 seat per day. On the other hand, number 3, sometimes there's an influx of more space available, and if you're flexible enough and ready, you could snag them. That's luckily how I was able to snag 4 business class seats on Singapore Airlines traveling from Vancouver through LAX to Singapore, when Aeroplan in Singapore had a closer partnership where Singapore Airlines released business class seats to Aeroplan themselves and not other Star Alliance partners. I've never seen that since, where so many dates had 3, 4, 5 seats available on Singapore Airlines. Or with ANA, sometimes they'll do an equipment swap where they change the aircraft used on that route, adding more availability to those dates, suddenly showing extra business class seats available throughout that season. 4, sometimes the number of points required for the same flight could change. For example, my China Airlines flight over to Taipei costed me 83,500 Flying Blue miles, but now only costs 66,000 Flying Blue miles. Granted, again, there was more availability back then, and there was also a 30% bonus running at that time. And then 5, new partnerships, like the relatively new airline Starlux when they partnered with Alaska, releasing a ton of award space throughout the calendar for as low as 60,000 points. You can see how there's so much to keep track of, and although it's my interest and I want to be able to take advantage of deals when they come out, even I start to feel the stress sometimes, which could honestly be one of the biggest things people don't talk enough about in this space, and that's the stress required to keep up with anything and everything all around. In the extreme case, you can go as far as having no flight home up until just 2 days before needing to fly back, which you can learn more about up there. With all of that said though, what it really comes down to is, what do you personally enjoy? Do you love to travel, enjoy elevated experiences, or love to find the best deals? Then you're like me and this space is perfect. But if you just want to fly economy, have your points stretched as far as possible, or don't like travel in the first place, I would imagine this is not for you. For me personally, I really do enjoy this. Not just the cards, the min-maxing of value, or redeeming for thousands of dollars in travel experiences without paying with dollars, but even things like visiting 4 out of the top 5 airports in the world, Singapore Changi, Seoul Incheon, Tokyo Haneda and Narita, trying different airlines like SQ and EVA, or even different aircraft, like how the 777-200 United I flew on was significantly worse of an experience than the newer 787 Dreamliners or A350s, with updated interiors, better cabin pressure, and air quality. And so for all about that story and how I had no flight home up until 2 days before needing to come back, want to check out this video here, and I'll see you in the next one.